Listen, here at the Greenhouse, we are sort of a network, a larger movement of churches that align amongst common vision and core values. And so this morning, live and direct, we have the privilege of hearing from a friend, a mentor, one of the pastors in my life, almost 15 years now. My wife and I met serving under Pastor Robbie in the youth group in Gainesville. So he likes to try to take credit for all the great things, but I give God the credit, so I'm that kind of guy, but you know how it goes. But would you join me in giving wild South Florida welcome to Pastor Robbie Johnson, the executive pastor of Greenhouse Church, Gainesville.
Man, it is good to be with you guys this morning, and it's funny, my notes, at the front of my notes is like, tell the story how I can take credit for John and Nancy. Literally, it's in my notes, and but seriously, so good to be here. My name is Robbie, one of the pastors with Greenhouse, and a good friend of John, Zara, and Cindy, a lot of you guys here in the community, and if you got a Bible, you can turn it to Deuteronomy chapter 17. It's in the pages that are probably sticky because you haven't read them much. It's okay. It's all right. So, you know, we're the Greenhouse, and that name came from very unique, and it actually spawned here in South Florida probably like 5 years ago, Zara. Is that when you guys kind of, 5 years ago, the Greenhouse, South Florida, and then we followed suit up in Gainesville, changed our name to Greenhouse. That name green means something. So on the back of your bulletins, grab your bulletins real quick, and I'm going to tell a quick story, and then we'll dive into the scriptures. On the back of your bulletins is this little logo, and it's called Living in the Green. And what we say if someone asks, hey, so now that I love Jesus, what do I do? We say, go and make disciples. And we're like, what does that look like? What does it look like to make a disciple? And we're like, oh, I'm glad you asked. Here are the ingredients for you to be a disciple and for you to make a disciple. And we call it living in the green. And the first priority is a love for God. We call that worship. Next would be get on mission, doing something for God, for the lost, the least, the hurting, those who don't know God. Once you fall in love with God, you get on mission, you find community. And that is the order it happens, right? And so some of you, and there's some single people in the room, you can even see it, worship, mission, community. And then once you have all three of those in motion, you're actually living in the green. And that's when we feel like life is going to be at the fullest. And some of you are single in the room. Any single people in the room say, whoop! Come on. So there's a verse in the Bible which I love. It says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and favor from the Lord, right? So we can say it like this, if we want to be kind of like 21st century, he who finds a husband finds a good thing and favor from the Lord, right? So some of us are single in the room right now, and I got to thinking, I'm like, okay, how can I help you guys find a spouse? I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if I come down here and half the room gets married in like 6 months? That'd be really cool, right? So let me just give you a tip. The last thing you want to do is be single and looking for a spouse, because that's like a complete turnoff for everyone. Every male in the room is like, the moment they get a female around, it's like, I can't wait to get married. They're like, ooh, let me go check over here, all right? So we all got commitment issues. It's okay. So the best thing you can do if you love Jesus and you're looking for a spouse is not actually go looking for a spouse, is to actually go get on mission. Because the verse is not like he who finds a wife. It's actually as you're going, as you're on mission, as you're going about your business, you actually run into your spouse. You find them along the way. You don't go looking for a spouse. You go looking for God and his mission. Then you find community. And that's what happened for John and Nancy. So I tell people all the time, as a youth pastor, I ended up wedding a lot of people because I'd recruit this person who's an amazing stud of a guy, and it wasn't John, but there was other studs of guys that I'd recruit, and I'd say, hey, come and be a part of the team and disciple teenagers. And so I said, you love God, get on mission, reaching out to this generation. They get on mission. They're running after teenagers, and they're discipling, and they're on mission. And next thing you know, they look over, and there's this like cute girl, and she loves teenagers. She loves God, and she's on mission loving teenagers. And they're running, they look at each other, and they're like, I love teenagers, and you're cute, and I'm handsome, and let's do this. And that's what happened to John and Nancy. And now we have Liam. But I'm serious, some of you in the room are like, hey man, God, would you send me your spouse? Do you know the best thing you can do to be able to find your spouse? Get on mission. Ask God, what can I do for your glory? And it may be a part of this community. It may be something at your work. It may be something at your school. But you got to get on mission. True story. I am leading so this summer we're going to do Reach Florida here in South Florida. We're going to do it in 4 cities around the state of Florida. A week of just giving our community Jesus with hands and feet and the whole thing, right? So what was it, 19 years ago, we were doing Gainesville outreach. What you're going to do here, we were doing just in Gainesville. I'm driving a bus. I've got a team of teenagers with me. And then all of a sudden this leader comes on and she's really cute. And I can see she's kind of like staring at me and what can you do? What can I do to help? She was so cute. I thought she was a teenager. And I kind of treated her like a teenager for a while. And then I realized, she's like dateable. And the next thing you know, we're loving God on mission, and then we end up getting married too, and that's my wife, Amanda, and she's right here. Amanda, stand up, wave at everyone, real big. That's my beautiful wife, Amanda. This is my lovely daughter, Anna. Anna, you got to stand up and wave to everyone. She actually wants to preach right now. And this is my son, Matthew. He will stand up and flex. No. Oh, that's my beautiful kids. I love them a lot. And my son and I might have beat Greg and John in golf yesterday. I'm not sure. That may or may not have happened. And Jerry was with us. All glory to God, though, all right? All right, back to the scriptures. Deuteronomy chapter 17. We're starting a new series on leadership. Everybody say leadership. This series is called King of Kings. King of Kings. And we're going to be exploring 1st and 2nd Kings, leaders in the Old Testament that were kings. And we're actually going to take a study of them, and we're going to say, hey, what does this mean for me as a husband, as a wife, as a single college student, as a teenager, someone who's wanting to follow God. So if you would, stand with me while we read this passage in Deuteronomy chapter 17. And this is the big thought for today. Leadership is stewardship. Leadership, your leadership, is stewardship. Stewardship doesn't just put you over something, it puts you under someone. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, this is talking about when you put a king in authority, this is what's going to happen. This is what you have to do. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, let us set a king over us like all the nations around us. Be sure to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your own brothers. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not a brother Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you're not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. And he must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Lord, thank you for your scriptures. Oh, Lord, they are life to us, and we love them. We give you praise for them, and would they deeply impact our hearts this morning. In Jesus' name, if you agree, would you say amen? Give someone a high five around you. Tell them to get ready, get ready, get ready. So I did run into Marianne, who runs the kids in Sprouts, and she's like, Pastor Robbie, can you please not preach an hour and a half? And so I'm only going to preach an hour. So first point of 7 is this, and it's this. Everyone is a king, and everyone has a kingdom. Everyone has a king, is a king, and everyone has a kingdom. And this point of this passage and of this message is hopefully the liberating portion for you. Everyone in this room is a leader in some capacity. Everyone is a king with a lowercase k. You have a kingdom. Maybe it's your child. Maybe it's the classes you teach. Maybe it's the department at your job. Maybe it's your social media accounts. Maybe it's your image. Some people say, I'm no king. I'm no leader. I have no authority. I have no ruling reign. How could you say I'm a king? Listen to me. You have a sphere of influence, a sphere of impact. You have an aftershock of your decisions, whether good or bad. You have influence. The question is what are you influencing? And it may vary in breadth and it may vary in depth, but everyone in this room right now is a king. Everyone in this room has a kingdom. And recognizing this is huge because leadership is necessary for your kingdom. So those of you, there's a lot of young parents in here, and I love the life and the vibrancy of young kids everywhere. I don't want to stay at your house at night and get up with them, but I love seeing them on Sunday mornings. But listen, if you've got a kid in this room, you have a kingdom and you are a king. If you've got a job and you've got oversight, you are in a place of authority. You are in a place of leadership that God has granted you. Now, here's the kicker with leadership, and I think we all know this. It's actually like a razor blade. It has like a knife. In other words, it's sharp and it's dangerous. When used correctly, it's redemptive and a blessing. But when used wrongly, it's a curse. It's loaded with potential. It's loaded with potential to change the world. And all of us have been experienced, isn't this true, of bad leadership that we hate. You know what I hate more is when I give bad leadership. And usually you end up hating a lot of what's ultimately in you. And here's the key. The key is our leadership and our sphere is from God. We are stewards. Solomon, who's a king we're going to look at in just a second, he wasn't just a king because he chose to be a king. He was a king because God allowed him to have rulership and authority over things on this earth. In Psalms chapter 24, it says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it on the seas and established it in the waters." In Psalms 100, verse 3, "Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people. We the sheep of his pasture." This morning in the Bible reading plan, I was reading in 1 Chronicles chapter 24. And a lot of that you end up skimming because it's a lot of genealogies and everything else. But there's some nuggets in there if you stay with it. In verse 14, it says, "But who am I?" This is David praying to God after he kind of taken up an offering for the temple. He says, "But who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you. And we have given you only what comes from your hand." Isn't it crazy that sometimes we give to God and we're like, "God, you're welcome." And God's like, "It was always mine to begin with." And some of us with our leadership, we're like, "God, I'm going to give you my life as a leader or as a king." He's like, "Listen, the only authority you have is the authority that I have given you. It'd be great for you to give it back to me and walk in that, but just so you know, everything has been given by God." Verse 16, "Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a temple for your holy name comes from your hand, and all of it belongs to you." Because God is the giver of your kingship, and he has made you a king or a queen, if he has given you authority and leadership, God has the right to tell everyone what to do because it's ultimately his. I have a house, and excited for John and Nancy buying their first house. I have a house, and I love this house. We bought it about a year ago, and when we got into the house, you have your imagining spaces, and I told my daughter, we looked at it, she gets first pick, she's the oldest, and she chose this room, and Matthew's next, and he chose this room. Ultimately, Amanda and I chose the room we wanted, and they got to kind of spoil us from there, and so they have their room, right? And recently, I went and Matthew was in his room, and I went to walk into his room, and I went to step across the threshold, and he goes, "Excuse me?" I was like, "What's the matter?" And he's like, Did I give you permission to come into my room?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "I'm busy right now." And I said, "Well, I need to tell you something." He's like, "Well, excuse me, this is my room, and you gave this room to me, and I have complete authority and jurisdiction over this room, so I'll let you know when you can come into my room and cross this threshold, and when you're able to speak in this room. And actually, Dad, you left some stuff over here. I'll let you in so you can get your stuff out of my room." Now, that story didn't happen because my son's alive right now, all right? But go with me for just a little bit, right? Isn't it funny that God has allowed us to have authority? He's allowed us leadership. He's allowed us kids. He's allowed us jobs. He's allowed us to be kings and have kingdoms. He's allowed us to be queens and have kingdoms. He's allowed that. And then could you imagine saying like, "Actually, God, thank you for this room, and I know you provided this, and you pay all the electricity for it, and everything that I'm sleeping on in this room right now was provided by you, but just so you know, for right now, it's mine." And some of us, we compartmentalize our life a little bit where we're like, hey, God, you can kind of come into this area of my bedroom and you can come and sit on the little dresser area right here and you can come in here and you can borrow some of my clothes. But God, ultimately, this is my room. This is mine. And we lose the bigger picture, which is, my kids have a bedroom in my house, but it is my house. And I have authority over that house. I have authority of what goes up on their walls and what goes under their beds and what doesn't get cleaned up or picked up. It is ultimately my room that I have given them an opportunity to lead and steward. The moment you get authority, it's because not just authority to have someone, you actually become up authority under someone. Some of us, and let's just be honest, we're in the wrong rooms. We're leading things and we're kings over certain areas of our life that maybe we shouldn't be. Some of us need to invite God into our careers, into our jobs, into our parenting. The worst thing about Christianity is a lot of Christians compartmentalize the kingdom, right? They compartmentalize the kingdom. They're like, God, you can be a part of this life, but you can't be a part of my sex life, and you can't be a part of my politics, and you can't be a part of my job. But listen, you can have Sunday mornings, right? We compartmentalize. The beautiful thing about when you submit your area of life and your life under God, it's actually an easy yoke. When you're fighting against the king is when it gets hard. And when you're trying to cling to stuff, it gets heavy. It becomes yours. You grab it too tight. Recently, I was with Greenhouse after I've been a pastor here for about 17 years. And they said, Robbie, it'd be good for you to take a little sabbatical. And I said, what's a sabbatical? And they're like, a season of rest. And I was like, okay, that sounds kind of miserable for a guy like me that's wired. Now, what do you want me to do? We want you to not work for 6 weeks. I was like, so, not do anything? He's like, no, we just want you to rest. And I was like, isn't that what heaven's for, I was like, I kind of like what I do. No, we want you to just shut it down. And you can't check emails. You can't come to meetings. You can't be a part of anything. You can't even come to the Greenhouse Christmas parties. Now, an extrovert like me, that's frustrating, I'm like... So I was like, okay, we'll do this. It was the most liberating thing because let's just be honest. Sometimes God gives you jurisdiction and leadership, and rather than stewarding his stuff, it becomes your stuff. And then when you cling tight, it gets burdensome, it gets heavy, and then you feel like you got to make things happen. You got to grind, you got to force this. But when it's God's, you're just like, oh no, God, it's yours. Like, this thing's not working. What are you doing wrong here, God? But when it's yours, you cling tight. When it's your kids and not God's kids, when it's your marriage and not God's marriage, when it's your job and not God's, when it's your money and not God's money, when it's yours, all of a sudden, man, the yoke gets heavy. It's no longer light. And I remember 2 weeks in, just like, oh man, like this. But it was good for my soul that Greenhouse did fine. And about 2 weeks in, I'm like, God, this is not my church. He's like, hello. I said, this is your church. He's like, thank you. This church would be okay. And he's like, mm-hmm. God, you don't need me. Mm-mm. It's an honor to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. So I should have more of a heart of gratitude versus clinging ownership. Mm-hmm. There's two sides. There's two kind of kingdom approaches to leadership. One is you cling too tight to it and becomes yours. The other one is you don't really embrace the size of the room that God has for you. I think there's some leaders in the room that your capacity is larger than you're allowing God to steward through you. And he wants to expand it. Now listen, we have this vision here that picture your capacity as a cup, right? And God's going to pour opportunity and leadership into your life and capacity. The problem is as he's pouring it, if your character is not large enough, the weight of the leadership will crush you. So what you want to do is ask God to expand your character more than to expand your sphere of influence. If your character is large, you want your influence to grow. I don't pray for people's influence to grow. I don't pray for their leadership to grow. I pray for their character to grow. When your character grows and expands, then you can handle God's blessing and overflow. So pray, ask God, would you expand my character? But listen, some of you have more capacity than you think you do. It's funny because there's this book called Grit. And in the book, you guys ever heard of the book called Grit? And it talks about this passionate perseverance that people have. A lot of millennials in the room. They say actually the grit quotient for millennials is pretty low. In other words, they have passion, but they have very little perseverance. And then I met this guy named David Goggins. Anybody heard of David Goggins? I have a picture of three people. I have a picture, I think, of David Goggins. David Goggins is on the left right here. So this is a true story. The man on the right, I can't remember his name. He's not very important in this story, but he wrote a book about David Goggins. The guy on the right had trained for 2 years for an ultra marathon. Does anybody know what an ultra marathon is? It's a 100-mile run. Hello, I haven't ran 100 miles in like ever total, in my life. 100-mile race, 100-mile nonstop race. So the guy on the right had been training for 2 years. He'd had personal trainers. He had all the necessary equipment. He had the cool shoes. He had the backpacks. He had the camel pack. He had everything. He lines up at the starting line. He looks across the starting line, and he sees David Goggins. Now, he wasn't as fit at this moment. He's like 250 pounds, which is not a big guy unless you're running 100 miles. So then he's standing at the line, and he doesn't have cool shoes. He doesn't have the fit clothing, and he's just kind of standing there like this. And the guy blows a whistle. The guy on the right looked at him and said, "No, this guy's going to get crushed." At mile 70, David Goggins sits down. His shin splints are so bad, he had to take compression shocks and pull them tight. He's peeing blood, and at this moment in his life, he's broken every small bone in his feet at mile 70. So at mile 70, he sat there in a chair and said, "Let's go." And he ran the last 30 miles nonstop. So the guy on the right, who had been training for 2 years, walks up to him and is like, "Who in the world are you?" And he looked at him and he said, "When your mind tells you you have reached capacity, you've got 40% more in you. 40% more in you." And so this guy on the right invited David Goggins to live with him and said, "I want you to teach me how to think about life again." Now listen, some of us are weary because we're clinging too tight and we don't understand how to steward the leadership with the easy yoke and letting God flow through us. Another capacity for some of us is we don't realize God has made your shoulders a little broader than you think you have. He's given you a little more strength than you give yourself credit for. And Satan has communicated to you that you can't do it. You don't have enough. You're a mom and you're going to screw up this child. You're a dad and you're going to screw up this family. You're a teacher and you're going to screw up these kids. They're going to hate you when they get to college when they're in third grade and they're like, "I remember my third grade teacher." You've got capacity that you don't realize. Listen to me. Every single one of you in this room, you are a king, and God has given you a kingdom. And I want you to, don't hold it too tight, but open your hand and say, "God, use me. Steward, flow through me." So that's the liberating side. And in this passage in Deuteronomy chapter 17, we talk about the danger. And it's about the gold, it's about the glory, and it's about the girls. The gold, the glory, and the girls. Listen to me. I want people to run to be able to be the leaders that God has designed them to be. I want them to have authority. I want them to have impact. I want them to have influence. But you and I got to get brutally honest about the dangers associated with leadership. Solomon begged God. God said, "Solomon, you can have whatever you want to have." He said, "I want wisdom." He's like, "All right, I'm going to give you the rest of everything else that everyone else is asking for." The problem is, in Deuteronomy chapter 17, it said, watch out for the gold, watch out for the glory, and watch out for the girls. We have to recognize in our sphere, and especially in American culture, that these are dangerous. Verse 16 and 17, we see that the king must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, must not take many wives, must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Solomon, as an example of leaders, broke all three of these. He multiplies wealth in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 14 through 23. His wealth became world renowned. Remember, Queen of Sheba came to visit him to just see the splendor of Solomon's wealth. In 1 Kings chapter 10, it says he multiplies horses. He had a stable larger than any other stable. In 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 4, it says he multiplies wives. There was 3 warnings as leaders, as kings that are going to be given kingship. There was 3 warnings. gold, glory, and girls. Solomon thought he could conquer all three of them. You know what's funny? I was looking at this morning in Matthew chapter 4 when Jesus is being tempted. One of the temptations that the devil throws at him is about glory. I mean, I'll give you this. And this was the end of Solomon's reign. I mean, don't we want to be the type of leader that doesn't just start well, but actually finishes well? I mean, our culture is full of people that start with passion and perseverance, and they end just barely making it into heaven. We want to be leaders, and we want to be the type of kings that God gives authority and power, but we don't just start well, we actually finish well. And in chapter 11, verse 4, it says, "As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. And his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been." Friends, it's dangerous. Not many of you should presume to fight to be leaders, to be teachers, is what James says. Don't go after this. Listen to me. Leadership we need it. It needs to be sharper, better, more holy, more godly. I want you to crave it, but I want you to know it is a razor blade. It has power and anointing and grace to it, but it is deadly if we're not careful. We long for it. We fight for it. We manipulate for it. But do we recognize the danger of it? Do we see leadership as the razor blade that it is? So it's easy to judge Solomon, right? You're looking at a distance and you say, man, if I was Solomon, if I was in his shoes, if I had everything he had, I would have handled the gold. I would have handled the glory. I would have handled the girls. Listen to me. So the prayer that we need to pray as a faith family, as a faith community, is that God, do not give me more gold. Do not give me more glory. Do not give me more wives or husbands or girls. Well, I don't, yeah. So then my character can handle. Look at gold. I mean, look at our culture. You're like, man, I don't have to worry like Solomon worries. Just because can I just go ahead and, some of you are young and you're going to be making lots of money in your life. Just because you make this much doesn't mean you need to spend that much. And just because you can make tons more doesn't mean you ought to sacrifice everything else to get there. I was meeting with, let's just say for everyone that's young in the room, I was meeting with a friend. We became friends 15 years ago. He has achieved what many young people in the room want right now. He's my age, he's 41 years old, and he is officially retired. Tens of millions of dollars. And his kids, he looked at me and he said, honestly, it's kind of sad because I love sports, but none of my kids like sports because I wasn't there for the last 15 years to help them fall in love with sports. And he said, I've got the gold, but honestly, I had to sacrifice to be able to get it. So now I'm spending my time redeeming my marriage and redeeming my fatherhood because I've been absent for this. Some of us think the ultimate agenda of life is gold, but listen to me, it's never enough. Everyone in the room says, if I only made $5,000 more a year. I mean, just so you know, everyone's like, if I had about $5,000 more, I would be okay. Do we know $5,000 will not solve the problem? Because then you're like, man, I can afford the watch. I can afford the extra car. I can afford this. And you end up affording different things. I only know a few people, honestly, that stop at enough. That they stop at enough when it comes to gold. Our culture, just so you know, one of the top sins of our whole culture is greed. Can we just acknowledge that? I mean, seriously, you have a greed issue. Can I say that? Oh, that's great. Thanks for coming, Pastor Robbie. We'll see you in 5 years. And I have a greed issue. It's our culture, all right? We have a greed. I was going to tell you, look at your neighbor and tell them they have a greed issue. Don't do that, actually. Don't do that. I have a friend another friend, he's about my age, early on when he first graduated college, he was praying, and the Lord said, I want you to give away half of everything you make. Yeah, you better sigh. I mean, some of you make no money, you're like, yeah, I'll do it, 15 years in, I was talking to him the other day, and he's like, so I was looking at the new tax plan, and now you actually can get tax breaks on giving away up to 60% of your money. And I was like, you're the only person on the planet who actually cares about that. Listen, there's a radical lifestyle. Listen, he's the most peaceful, gentle, loving. His family's whole, and he has more than enough. You have to ask yourself, what's enough? Taste the gold. You know what's going to be rough for some of us? And maybe you've talked to someone like this. You have a ladder that you're fighting for, and you lay it up, and you fight, and you're climbing, and you're trying to get to this gold, and you're climbing. If I can make this much, if I can get there, if I can have this, and we're climbing. And you know what's going to be bad in life is when you get to the top of the ladder, and you realize the ladder was on the wrong wall. And what you've been fighting to get your whole life really doesn't matter that much. It's dangerous. The downfall of leadership. We see it all across the American church. The downfall of leadership, one of the dangers is going after the gold. The next one would be the horses. It would be the glory. It'd be the splendor. It'd be the status. It'd be your image. So horses were a sign of I can get places. And this was the only real means of transportation, of speed. I can get places faster than anybody else. In a war, you'd say, listen, they had foot soldiers and then they had chariots. There was like foot soldiers that could kind of fight, and they were strong, but then they said they had 900 chariots. And 900 chariots were just invincible at times. Horses moved faster, they were stronger, they were the means to. So when someone said, I've got a horse, or I've got horses, or you've got Solomon who had a massive stable, he's like, listen, I've got status, I've got something, you should see the amount of my Twitter followers, my Instagram followers, my Snapchat followers, you should see my splendor. I'm amazing. Everybody loves me. Did you see how many likes I got on that? Do you see how many? Some of the things you're getting likes at, just so you know, are actually feeding a side of you that needs to be crushed. Horses could take you places. Are you fighting for more gold? Are you fighting for more glory? Are you trying to get larger, faster, nicer? Solomon loved that. He loved the pretense. He loved to be greater on the outside than he was on the inside. The vision here is that we would be a community of believers that are actually greater on the inside than we are on the outside. It's a dangerous place for people to think you're better than you are. But we live in a culture where the only thing we advertise is our great stuff. A friend of mine's like, man, I get criticized so much because I travel so much and I post all the pictures of everywhere I travel. I said, you know what the problem is? You don't post a picture of you fighting with your wife. He's like, no, I don't. Do you ever post a picture of you getting angry at your kids? No, I don't. Do you ever post a picture of you just being in the flesh all day and being mean to all your employees? No, I don't. I said, you are creating an image that is false. It's not true of who you actually are. That just so you know, it is dangerous. It's the horses of Solomon that we have at our fingertips every single day. Gold, glory, and girls. Solomon had 700 wives. If I had 700 Amandas, I would be okay because she's so amazing. So, let's just be honest. We're a sexualized culture. Greed, sexual immorality. If you're wondering how a leader should handle his or her body, you go to the owner of the body. Listen, it is not yours, it is his. When you're thinking about your sexuality and how you engage with your friend, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or whatever it is, listen to me. It's not, this is what I think it should be. You ultimately got to go to the king, the owner. Listen, you're just a steward of your leadership. You're just a steward, and you have to ask the owner of the house. You just have a room. God, what do you want me to do with this room? You can come and invade any part of it. This is your house. I'm just stewarding it. And we live in a sexualized culture. So you would judge Solomon. You say, listen, Solomon, how could you have 700 wives? And some of us have looked at 700 things in the past year. And we've got a harem in our head, and we're judging Solomon for having a harem in his house. There's got to be something about us as leaders that we step aside and we're like, holiness does matter. So the church, just so you know, the church in general over the last decade or two has overcorrected. You're right. It was legalistic. It was measured by what it did versus who we are. We could care less about social justice and the wrongs being done to the poor and the afflicted in our community. And we were over here in this holy, you got to put this front, you got to not do this, not do this, not do this. So we overcorrected and say, there's nothing wrong. There's no law. You're free, you're free, you're free. Listen to me. There's a middle ground here, the tension of like, I'm not saved or loved because of what I do, but listen to me. I'll be less in touch with my salvation the more wrong I do. I want you to catch that. Some of you are not far from God at all, but you have been so sinful in your behavior, you feel very distant from Him. You can't waller over here and expect to feel that grace and love that you want from God. There's a holiness of the children of God, and you got to go for it. Thank you for that little clap right there. Come on, somebody help me here. Listen, this is convicting to me as a dad, as a husband, as a disciple of Jesus. I'm like, Lord, help me to navigate. I don't want to be like culturally irrelevant, but I want to love your world more than this world. Just so you know, stewardship is inconvenient. Inconvenient. Isn't it much easier for it just to be yours and you do what you want with it? Stewardship is inconvenient. Leading under someone. Listen, it's easy to lead over someone. It's harder to lead under someone and say, God, I am yours, and I'm not doing what's convenient. I'm going to do what's inconvenient. Nobody had a problem with Solomon, what Solomon was doing back in the day. Did you guys know that? But Solomon wasn't just a lowercase king over people of Israel. He was under a capital K, King of Kings. I love Solomon. I'm going to go ahead and close this out here this morning because ultimately this whole series of King of Kings is going to be more about just even thinking about Solomon. It's going to be less about thinking about David, but it's actually going to be talking about the lineage of all of the amazing people that was under him, ultimately getting to Jesus. See, Solomon wasn't just a son of David. There was a son, a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson of David down the lineage. It was Jesus. And I gotta be honest with you, I love leadership. I love reading leaders. I love listening to leaders. I love being stirred by leaders. I want my leadership. I want people under my authority to flourish, to grow, to be alive. There's this book called Multipliers, and it talks about the type of leaders that the people under them are diminished versus those that are multiplying, and the type of leader that someone gets up under you and they flourish and they grow. Man, that is the vision for me. That's the vision. So I listen to people. I read people. But just so you know, what's dangerous sometimes is I get enamored with a bunch of lowercase kings, and I lose the vision of the capital K king. I get enamored with the lowercase king that's a successful businessman, and I watch his decision-making, his leadership, and it doesn't really line up with the capital K king, but I'm enamored, and I end up magnifying, and what you magnify, you worship, and what you worship, you actually become. And some of us become leaders we don't actually like, and they're not like our king. Listen, it's all got to go back to Jesus. The greatest leader, the greatest king ever to walk on the earth was Jesus. I mean, some of us, we embrace a culture of strong-arming the people under us, being not kind, not gentle, not compassionate, not understanding. We're like, this is business, this is done, this is this. No, listen. What would Jesus do? Let's be amazed at the way Jesus led. He didn't just come to lord it over people. He came to serve. You know what I love about moms? I think moms are the greatest leaders on the planet. Yeah, come on. I don't see any other leaders laying down their lives like moms do for their kids. Because that's true leadership, just so you know. It's dying to self. I've watched my wife over the years. When I'm just willing to throw in the towel, she's not. She stays up later. She gets up earlier. She thinks more. She prays more. She gives more to those kids than I could ever imagine. Once I started having kids and I watched how Amanda leads and loves our kids, it made me go to my mom and just be like, you're awesome. Because you don't even get it till you've watched it in motion and happen. See, listen, Jesus demonstrated his own love for us, and he led us in such a way because he actually died for us. You want to ask what great leadership is? It's not glory. It's not gold. It's not what you can get out of your position. It's what you can do for others. It's getting low. See, listen, there's a type of leadership that is all about self and it's all about lording. It's all about position. There's another type of leadership that says, how low can I go to get up under the people, God, that you love and help raise them up? That is the kingdom leadership. And I want us to get amazed with Jesus. Listen, some of us haven't read the red letters in a while. We just span through the Bible. Would you every single day read a story about Jesus and watch how he loves people? Watch how he responds. Watch how he goes deep beyond the surface level question they're asking. Listen, I want to be a great leader. I want you to be a great leader. I want you have a kingdom. I want you to lead well. The best example you can get is the way Jesus responded and led. If you're looking for the greatest leadership lessons, some of us love podcasts, we love books. Look to the greatest leader ever. You know, he loved us so much. It's beautiful. It's shocking. When John was going through the debt we've had, you know, it really is easy to love someone that's loving you back. It's easy to give yourself for people that are saying thank you. It's a whole different style of leadership. Where you're actually dying for people that hate you. That you're actually leading people, they're going to take advantage of you. That you're actually embracing people, they're going to hit you across the cheek. You're actually giving stuff to people, they're going to take more. Jesus had a model of leadership that was culture shifting. If anybody wants to be first, this is what he said in Mark chapter 9. He must be the last and the servant of all. Some of us are racing to the front of the line. And honestly, we just need to die and get to the back of the line. So what am I going to ask you guys to do today? And this is it. Would you submit your leadership, your kingdom? Would you first of all confess, God, you made me a king. You made me a leader. Listen, it's a lowercase key, okay? But it's okay to recognize, God, you've made me. You've given me authority. You've given me power that I didn't ask for, that I don't deserve. And there's that confession of like, I'm a king. The next move, the next second later is you submit your leadership to God. Say, God, I give my kingship and my kingdom to you. I submit my kingdom to you. And that's what I'm asking you guys to do today. So won't you stand with me? And can I get our prayer team to come up here to the front? And we're going to close in a time of worship and just responding to God in prayer. If you're in here this morning, you don't know Jesus, man, you haven't connected to the greatest leader ever, the King of Kings, this would be a great opportunity to connect with him. Maybe you feel a woo, a draw from him. Man, would you make him your Lord and King? Can we baptize today? Can we baptize someone today? If you've never been baptized, listen, someone's like, what must I do? How do I follow Jesus? Repent. Okay, I said I'm sorry. I've turned my life. What next? Be baptized. What's after that? No. Be baptized. But what after? Listen, it'll get clear. Be baptized is what you know. If you're a believer and you haven't been baptized, listen, go ahead and submit your life and be obedient and get baptized even today. I don't have clothes. I don't care. My hairnet, it'll be okay, you know. We won't post it on your Instagram page. We won't tag you on it, okay? No glory. But maybe during this prayer time right now, you just want to come up here and take a knee or take a seat right where you're at and say, God, thank you for giving me authority. Thank you for making me a king. And this morning, I submit my leadership and authority to you. You're my everything. So God, I love you. And even this morning, we honor you. We bless you as the greatest king ever. Thank you, Lord. As our king and leader, you died for us. We honor you. We bless you. We praise you. And we worship you, Lord. And now this morning, we submit our hearts to you. We submit our kingdoms to you. We submit our parenting, our jobs, our family, and all that you've given us under our authority. We submit it to you, God. It is yours. You have reign. You have authority. In Jesus' name.